This week was a lot. I was like, I can't handle any more stuff. I can't do any more things.
I agree. It was completely overwhelming. It was, and I don't know, in the best way and also the worst way, because I feel like it was overwhelming with the gym, but I really enjoyed all the workouts that we did. I enjoyed pushing myself, but it was also just, I just feel like there was just, I was going from thing to thing to thing.
Yep.
And then I was like, I don't have really any breathing room until tomorrow morning, and so I'm just going to rot in bed tomorrow morning, which, no, we call it fermenting now.
It's fermenting.
Yes.
What is it? You're
love
fermenting into a miso.
Into a beautiful miso.
Yeah, it just, sometimes it's short weeks at work have nothing going on, and then I sent so many emails, I think on Wednesday. I was like, I don't work for like the big tech company anymore, but it felt like I did, because I was emailing everyone about everything.
Yeah.
So my icebreaker for you this week, and I was thinking back to last week when we said like, what's your rose or whatever, and you said, what's keeping you alive? And I was like, I like that better, actually.
I do.
My icebreaker is like, what's something that you've thought about in the last week that you just really don't understand?
Oh my gosh.
Which it could be a lot for sure. But so I had to go to the Springs for work on Thursday.
Okay.
And it's like an hour in the car, and I'm on my way back, and I passed this Wrangler, and everyone has a Wrangler here, right?
Yeah.
It was a green Wrangler. It had one of those top decks, and there was something also on the top deck. Like it looked like one of those plastic ice packs, or like one of the really big ones. Anyways, this car was like tricked out, and I drove by it, and I was like, you know what I don't understand is when people decorate their cars to look like zombie hunting cars. I really don't get it.
Or to expand upon that, how many people are obsessed with the zombie apocalypse as if it is a thing. And I remember how in all seriousness, I had several coworkers be like, well, if we had a zombie apocalypse, I'd take you because of, the skill that you have. And I'm like, you'd take me as like a team? Like, are we drafting for like a softball league? Like, I don't know. So yeah, apparently that's a thing. And I bet that people who do their cars up like that are probably heavily invested in the certainty of a zombie apocalypse occurring.
And that's fine. Like, everyone's got their thing. I'm like, I feel weird even like when I see bumper stickers on a Tesla, let alone, because to me a Tesla has the vibe of like a coffee table, like a really nice coffee table for some reason. And it just feels weird to put a bumper sticker on it. But like these people have like all the little skulls and things on their cars. I was like, if that's what you want to do, 100% do you. I just don't really understand it.
The Tesla with bumper stickers is quite a juxtaposition, because I agree. Like it's a very, I feel like I think of Tesla drivers as very minimalist, very no nonsense people. And then, which actually, if I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know.
I disagree with that 100%.
Okay. I guess, no, they want everyone to know they're minimalist, no nonsense people, possibly. I guess. They talk about their Tesla a whole lot because they want you to know how it's better for the earth and, oh, look at my sky window or whatever.
I do wish I could get a tax break on my car.
I think that would be wonderful. I'd probably talk about a Tesla all the time too if I had one.
Yeah. Anyways, that was my thing this week, was just like, it's not an intrusive thought, it's just an extreme curiosity.
Okay. I have one. Okay, so we've had a mouse situation in our house.
No.
Yeah. So it's been going on for a couple of months, and Paul and this mouse, we named him Thomas. They were locked in this Tom and Jerry situation where Paul would, so first we tried the humane traps, and we were like, okay, we're just gonna like trap it and get it out of the house or whatever. And the mouse kept outsmarting Paul. Like, so first he started and he was like, I put a little peanut butter inside. It's a trap where they like crawl into a hole and then they get stuck.
Okay.
So he's like, I put some peanut butter in. The mouse figured out how to get the peanut butter and get out of the trap. He's like, all right, now, so then he leaves a little, little breadcrumb trail going in.
Sure.
And he's like, well, maybe that'll get him. Mouse eats it, doesn't get stuck. He's like, okay, so these things are just escalating, and Paul has a couple of scenarios where he's in a face-off with the mouse in the kitchen, like, and he's like, oh, like, he's like, he got away from me again. He's so angry. So then finally he's like, he gets fed up, right? And he's like, I'm buying the mouse trap, like
the
inhumane, like it's gonna, you know, like mouse murder is gonna happen in this house. And he's so psyched, right? So he sets it all up. Mouse gets the treat out of the trap, and he's like, fuck! Like, so this goes on for months, right? Okay. And then, so Thursday, I'm upstairs and I'm getting changed in the closet, and he comes up and he just wraps me up in a bear hug. And he's like, you know, he calls me by my nickname or whatever, and he's like, can you please just hold me? And I was like, okay. And I mean, Paul, we're all for, you know, I mean, he's a very cuddly human. It's not that's not a strange thing for him to do, but I was like, are you okay? Did something happen? And he's like, I need you to hold me and tell me everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, everything's going to be okay. I'm like, what happened? He's like, well, I went to go check the trap this morning, the mouse trap, and he was in there. And this man is in tears. Okay. He's like, he's being stoic, right? But he, like, I see tears in his eyes, and he's like, I never meant for this to happen. And I was like, you're telling me the last couple of months that you have been on this mouse chase, like this mouse hunt throughout the house, that you didn't think that this was what was going to happen if you set an inhumane trap or whatever. And I guess, so for me, it was like I feel like he was not thinking of the consequences, because he was just he was like, I'm so focused on the goal, right? That when the goal happened, we catch the mouse is unalived, and now he's super upset about it. And I mean, I was upset too. We both had a good cry over Thomas the mouse, and we were like, he led a good life. He ate a lot of peanut butter. But it was just so funny to me that he had all of a sudden this emotional outburst over killing a mouse, and I was like, I don't know what you expected, man, but it was incredible. So it's been a wild ride, but no more mice.
So the mouse was dead.
The mouse was dead.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the animal kingdom.
It is. I'm like, this is what we get for being the top of the food chain. You know, there's only so much that we can do. And so my dad is like, he's one of those people, he'll like watch YouTube videos on how to creatively trap mice, because my parents had like a mouse problem too in their old house. And my dad will build these like elaborate Rube Goldberg systems of like trapping, you know, he'll have like a wooden plank with like a piece of cheese at the end, and like the mouse hits the plank, and then he like slides down a thing and ends up in a like bucket of water, and then and drowns. And I was like, Dad, ew, like it's just so like, it's so barbaric, right? But then I don't know, I guess if it had been my choice, Thomas would have lived with us until we moved out. I'm just like, he's part of the family now.
My parents had snakes in their basement a couple years ago.
Like unintentionally. Like
yeah, unintentionally, yeah. From the outside to the inside, unintentional. They were like small and non-poisonous, but still like, that's not my vibe. And my mom was sending me videos for a little bit that was like my dad, you know, with garden gloves on, like taking these snakes out of the basement, and she's like, oh, Michael, and I was like, me too. don't not for me. So sorry for airing your dirty laundry out, Paul. But we love vulnerability here. So
we do, yeah. We definitely celebrate it, and I was really happy to see, not happy, but you know, like I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Paul cry. Not even at our wedding, so that's saying something. He really felt a strange attachment to this mouse. But yeah, happy for him that he was able to get in touch with his feelings.
That's good. Yeah, we love that.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about today. Great segue. Look at us.
We're so good at this.
We both walked into the gym yesterday, and it's been a long week for a number of reasons. And I don't know, like work was busy, and like this week again was another banger of a workout week. because open prep formally started. I'm sure we'll go further into the open, like the closer that we actually get to it, because it's week 1. But I feel like we both walked into the gym yesterday and we're like, we need to talk about some things. So we decided that today we're going to talk about mental health, and it's not the most fun thing you've ever talked about, but it comes up in our conversations quite a bit, and it's kind of like the beginning and the end of everything in a way, because so much of like what we do and how we process and what we talk about is related to mental health. So I don't know, and so we'll see how this goes. I also, like, at least for me, part of this and then part of like also writing a lot of the stuff that I do in terms of content creation is like, I feel like it's cringe to say like, I want to be relatable, but it's more like I want people to know that it's not, like, you're not alone, it's not just you. Mm-hmm. So like, we are open to talking about mental health here and in everyday life. Yeah. And so like, if anyone needs it, happy to, be a sounding board or anything for whatever you might need. Yeah. But,
yeah. And I think it's super important to hold space for people in those moments too, so it's just really nice to have a community where you can say, I need a vent session or I need whatever. That's really great.
Yeah. So
do you want to begin or shall I?
I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of days, after we've like been talking about it. I struggle primarily with anxiety. I was always a very anxious like kid, and part of it is genetics. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's genetics. We kind of trace it to my dad's mom. She could be pretty high strung during her life. My dad and my brother and I definitely struggle with anxiety, which my dad has been finding out in his retirement, I think, like what that has kind of meant. My mom likes to joke that if she was any more relaxed, she'd be dead. So that's, so I have like, 2 very different parents about some things. I was a gifted and talented kid, and I don't know if you've seen those memes of like, I was a gifted and talented kid and now I struggle with this suite of mental health issues, but it's 100% true. So I think like from a very young age, there was a lot of, a desire, like not necessarily a desire, but like a push to be competitive. For me, it was academically. For other people, maybe sports related. Mm-hmm. A push to be competitive from a very young age, like, to be the best, in school. A lot of projection, like forward thinking projection, kind of future projection. Because when you're in these programs, it's, you do the first one and then it's kind of assumed that you do the next and the next. And like, I think the assumption where I grew up, and it was a very competitive school district, was that like you attend a 4-year institution. So like everything is setting you up to go to college. You compete for attention from authority figures because they're the ones that are gonna write you your letters of recommendation. Like you defer a lot to authority figures. I found myself very deferential to authority figures. So that was kind of like the school side of it. And, my parents like pushed us to succeed. They're both academics. So I joke like we never played outside as kids because we were always like doing homework. But we definitely like, it was a drive to be successful, and I still feel that. I'm very scared of failure. I interestingly actually like I know we talked about this like 2 episodes ago. I don't necessarily suffer from imposter syndrome. Like I think that I had enough support in college to feel good about what I do. So like I am confident in the work that I do. I'm terrified of failure. And in tech, I'm sure you've heard people say like, oh, fail fast. It's like, no, I don't even want to touch the prospect of failure. So there's that like whole bundle from when I was a kid that definitely like manifests now. I think as an adult, it's shifted obviously from academics to like, I want to be successful in the workplace. Again, like I don't want to fail with what I do. And I think that definitely translates to the gym as well. And I'm sure like you experience it if we're doing a lift and you're just not in it mentally, like you fail and you're like, dude, this is stupid. Like, why is my brain making me do this right now? So there's definitely still that like sense of failure. How I see it manifesting now is like, I have a very hard time shutting my mind off. I'm always thinking about something, or I always have a song in my head. And that's just, I'm a musical person, like that's fine. But I was trying to do guided meditation the other day and I have like a song in my head. It's like, I just can't turn it off. And so I joke that my anxiety is like always at a 6 because I'm always thinking about something. And I think that's why I watch so much media content, because it's a time that I'm paying attention to something other than like my life. I get really nervous about people leaving and like losing friends, and that comes from trauma that I have from college of like losing a friend unexpectedly. And I went through a phase of like I still do, like I get really nervous that like people won't want to be my friend anymore, and that they'll leave my life, and that just like really has stressed me out over the last almost 10 years, especially I think because making friends as an adult is hard. So it's like if I lose one person, you know, you feel like you have to maybe work twice as hard to maybe fill that void if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
That's tied into how like the most recent struggle that I've had over the last couple of years and over the last like few months probably is I find it really tough to have hard conversations because I'm afraid that people will react to it negatively and will leave my life. So there's a lot that I hold in and that I don't express, which like, and then I end up laying in bed thinking about it, and it's like, God, if I had just said that, like, but I don't have the courage to because I feel like people are gonna leave. So that's like the big thing for me right now is like, how do I get the courage to be honest with people? So I told Ash and some of our girlfriends, I'm trying to do like one small honest thing every day. And it's not that I'm dishonest, but like I need to, like, it's easier to tackle that with one thought rather than a whole conversation. And I've gotten better at that over the last couple of years, because like especially in relationships, a couple years ago trying to get me to say something would have been like pulling teeth. So I've gotten a lot better. But I'm just like anxious about what's gonna happen if I say this. Like the worst case scenario is like they leave, and that terrifies me. And I wish I didn't care, but I do, and it's terrible. So those are kind of like the big motifs for me. And then I'm also very like risk averse. Like when we ski, I don't do dangerous things. Also because if I can't go to the gym, I don't have a personality. Like I can't, that's a big recovery process. I need to be able to, that's something that I prioritize, right? So like, don't ask me to do a black hill, don't do it. So that's kind of like the big buckets right now. I had a little brush with depression when I moved here, and I was going through it, and it took like relating the situation to someone else, and they themselves had to struggle with mental health in their past, and they said, oh, it sounds like you're depressed, like maybe you should talk to someone, and that's how I got into therapy. So it's been sorry, my cat's like running around, 2.5 years I think of going to therapy. I tried, and we've talked about this, like I tried one therapist that was more kind of like scientific based, or it felt like she was using more like scientific type tactics, but that like the bodywork stuff isn't really for me. So my other therapist, I've been seeing her now like basically this whole time, and it's much more talk therapy, and we do want to go further into therapy like in another episode with some people that we know. But I like really enjoy therapy. It took me a long time to figure out how to direct the conversation in a way that was more beneficial, and just kind of like taking ownership of my, like what am I feeling right now? My therapist, and I love her, for a while it was like, I want to talk about family, and it's like, no, I don't want to talk about family. There's nothing else I can do with my family. I need to talk about what's happening in this moment. So I see her, and I think it's helped me definitely become more self-aware. It's helped me recognize patterns that I'm in and possibly still in that I need to break. I don't medicate for anything. She's never suggested it. And I don't necessarily feel like I need to. I'm sure if like that came up, it would be a topic of conversation. I just choose really not to, because it's not something that necessarily prevents me from living my life. It's just something I've kind of adapted to. But yeah, that's a lot of kind of what I experience. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but
I have a comment about that I am actually surprised that, so you've only been doing therapy for a couple of years?
2.5 years, yeah.
Which is that's still relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so how did your parents feel, or as you were going through the things throughout your life, like all the anxiety about performing and everything, was there ever a conversation of, you know, how to alleviate those symptoms, or was there ever anyone who was like, maybe therapy could help with some of this, or was it more, because I'll tell you my experience, but
I feel like no, the answer's no. I feel like when I was in college, or kind of like immediately post grad, I was like, I probably should have been going to therapy this whole time. But also I feel like there hasn't really been a push for people to go to therapy until the last couple of years. Like with COVID and all of that changing, there's been much more of a social push, like maybe you should start talking to someone.
Right.
So no, there was not, like when I was growing up, you know, any of that. I mean, when I moved here and like, I was going through a breakup, I was trying to figure out like what I wanted out of my relationship in my life, and they were party to all of that, and they were totally fine with me going to therapy. And I think my brother also goes to therapy, so like I think we just kind of, the two of us just kind of figured it out. My dad's like, I love my parents, my dad's a boomer. I think just wasn't part of the discussion. You know, it wasn't part of the lexicon. Not sure, sir. And this is like, they never, my dad always joked as a, you know, I considered it a joke. When I was stressed out as a kid, he'd be like, oh, just go do yoga. I'm like, Dad, that's not how it works. Like, yoga is not the fix all for my anxiety problems, which is funny now because he does yoga. So I laugh at him kind of for getting into that. But I think he was just trying to encourage us to get into like calming type behaviors. But it just, we never had anything as kids. But I also don't think it was that prevalent, to be honest.
Well, and also you were a good kid, right? You were
quote unquote.
And I feel like the good kids and the gifted and talented kids flew under the radar. And people were like, well, they're doing what they're supposed to. So nobody's really paying attention to them. Or not that they're not paying attention, but you're seeing all the good, but you're not considering what's going on.
For sure.
You know, looking at it holistically. So that's very interesting. I have to say you're very well adjusted for.
Thanks.
And I mean, I know how much, even in a short amount of time, therapy can be very. I mean, I went to therapy for my most recent stint with therapy was about 6 months long, and it was the most eye-opening version of therapy that I had ever done. And I changed significantly. I think you also have to be ready to change, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people who will get stuck in patterns of, you know, they're blaming external circumstances, or they're, you know, there's just, you have to be ready to heal and ready to take a deep, hard look at yourself. And a lot of people, that's very difficult for them.
So.
I was not a good kid. Well,
don't say that.
Well, okay. I was a kid that I was very good at school, and so for that I flew under the radar. But I was prone to outbursts, and I couldn't sit still in school, and I just do really dumb shit, you know. I remember like one time I wrote this really sarcastic letter to my teacher because I habitually didn't do my homework. Like I would never turn assignments in, and this is like as far back as like 4th grade, right? And so I had to stay in for recess, which was a social death sentence, right? And she's like, well, while you get to think about what you did and write me a letter about why you didn't turn your homework in for the 10th time this week or whatever. I wrote a really sarcastic letter to her about it and was like, oh, blah, 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 like, maybe you should suspend me so that you can further, you know, dismantle my social life or whatever. I don't know. I wrote some snarky letter. So she did. I think I was the youngest child. I was in 4th grade, and I had to do an in-school suspension where I sat, which wasn't even a thing in elementary school, I don't think. They basically dragged my desk out to the hallway, and then I had to sit there in solitude and do all my work that I had missed while the students filed in and out for like gym and stuff like that, and everyone's gawking at me, and I'm like, great, this is great for, you know, whatever, you know, if I didn't have anxiety before, I sure do now. I think it's part of, you know, I think about how I now have an issue with being perceived, and I feel like some of these situations that I got into as a child definitely contributed to that. So I was always causing trouble in, not necessarily in ways that you would see like typical kids, but I did get into fights a lot. Yeah. I kicked a kid in the chest once.
Damn.
It's
a whole new side of you.
There's just, girl, there's so much. I'm laughing and like also shameful at the same time, because I'm just like, the way, again, I'm a kid, like, right, like kids don't, and there was no talk of emotional self-regulation in my household, right? My father has a traumatic brain injury. My mother might as well have a traumatic brain injury. She has hydrocephalus, so she's suffered from the effects of that for a very long time. And my father was also, I grew up in a household that was, I wouldn't say it was violent per se, but my dad was a martial arts instructor. And so a lot of times we used our fists to solve problems when we should have been using our words. And I just never learned how to do that from a young age. So a lot of my outbursts would come out in the form of, you know, fighting. So so another time when I got suspended in school, this is all in elementary school too, and I kicked a kid in the chest because he was making fun of me, and I mean, serves him right, he was an asshole, but like
some kids though, like,
some kids are assholes, you know, and I was like, it served you right for trying to be a bully to me. And then, you know, so I got into trouble for that, and so there were just all of these, you know, incidents, and everyone always kind of, they referred to me as a troubled child. By the time I was in middle school, I was on like an IEP, and you know, my grades were suffering, and I was, you know, hanging out with like a group of people who were not super wholesome, and you know, I was always looking at it through the lens of, well, I'm just a bad kid. I had a bad time growing up. I don't have a great family. I don't have a lot of like family support. And you know, people would toss around terms like bipolar and stuff like that, you know, because I think that at the time there wasn't a whole lot of research, and there still isn't, on how ADHD manifests itself in girls. So I've been going to therapists and counselors my whole life, and it's always been under the pretense of figuring out why are you so angry? Like, let's fix your anger issues, because girls aren't supposed to act like this. Well, nobody's supposed to act like this, but I always felt like it was especially like, everyone's like, you're just such a pretty sweet girl, like why do you have to act out like this? And I'm like, I don't know. So like I said, a lot of talk of, you know, well, maybe it's bipolar disorder, maybe it's oppositional defiance disorder, which I do have a touch of, but we'll get into that when I get to my final diagnosis. And so I went to see a slew of counselors, and it wasn't until I was in my early 20s I went to a therapist who really put me on the trajectory of thinking about my entire childhood experience very differently. And I went to her all of 2 times. The second time I was on some diatribe about God knows what. I had probably ping-ponged all over the place, talking about several different topics, as I am wont to do. And at the end, she said, you know, and at the end, I just had this outburst, and I'm like, so I don't know what my problem is. I'm like, everybody's called me bipolar. They said I'm depressed. They say I have ODD and all these other things, and I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to get a handle on my life, because I felt like I was constantly in this cycle of, oh, I get my shit together, oh, I spin out of control. I get my shit together, spin out of control. Whether it was drinking, drug use, you know, just engaging in any kind of activity that would just, it felt like my life was spiraling. And so she stopped and she looked at me and she was like, she's like, no part of me sees bipolar disorder. She's like, I think that you have been looking at this the wrong way the entire time. She's like, I think that you have ADHD, and I think nobody has ever thought to tell you because there's not a lot of research, and there's definitely nothing out there for women.
Yes.
And then I never went back to her because but she planted that seed in my head, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about this the next time that I get an appointment with her, and maybe this will put me on a path of healing or whatever. And then 6 years goes by, and because it's just one of those things and a lot of ADHD people can probably relate to this, they're like, just taking action on anything is so effing impossible some days. Like just picking up the phone to call my therapist to schedule the next appointment, impossible, you know? And I don't know what that is about our brains, but like getting started on anything or even having like a continuance of anything, so hard. So 6 years later, probably a little more, the pandemic happens, and I am going through a really rough time with my family, and specifically with my sister. We were having some disagreements, and that was happening while I was also I was noticing that my drinking was getting out of control again, and just a lot of other unsavory behaviors that I tend to fall into when I'm not maintaining discipline for myself. And I was like, you know what? Once again, like I am back I'm just back in the same situation that I'm always in, and it's affecting my family life. You know, I'm very close with my sisters. We had a very traumatic childhood growing up, and I think we are trauma bonded, but we're trying to rediscover each other's personalities as adults. Because I think it's very different from how when you grow up in the childhood that I grew up in, you're just trying to survive, and that's not necessarily who you are as a person. So I was really upset that I was having disagreements with, you know, my sister. She's the closest person in my life. You know, we've just gone through a lot together, and I was like, I need to get help. And you know, people had always said, like, you know, you need therapy, you need to really figure this out. And I had kind of, like I said, bounced around from therapist to therapist. So I found a therapist who specialized in, goodness, I'm gonna forget what it's called now. That's so unfortunate. I should also mention that there's currently, I don't know if it's still happening, but there's an Adderall shortage. I cannot get my prescription filled for the life of me. It always takes way longer, and so I'm currently out of Adderall. So this is actually going surprisingly well.
I'm proud of you.
But yeah, this could get a little unhinged, because if I haven't previously been blurting out whatever's on my mind, now it's just going to come out, and so if anything crazy comes out that's just like not good for air, we'll cut it, right?
Just call it a specialist. You went to go see a specialist.
Yeah, so I went to go see a specialist. Thank you for getting me back on track. He specialized in a type of therapy that, so rather than, you know, CBT, DBT, which is focusing on your thoughts and how they relate to your life, he was looking more at how my thoughts interact with like my body, and you know, specifically like how I'm holding on to stress and how I'm holding on to a lot of old trauma. So I started working with him, and he was very good about, like, we would talk, we'd go for walks, and that was how our therapy was walking therapy. And he would just work through, as we were talking about difficult subjects, he'd be like, okay, like, where are your shoulders at right now? And I'd be like, oh God, they're in my ears. And, you know, or like, where are different parts of your body, and like, how are you feeling in your body as you talk about this? And that was super helpful for me because my mind is such a jumble of thoughts all the time. And I kind of like you, I can't really, it's so difficult for me to get out of my brain.
Yeah.
So getting into my body was very, very helpful for me in that moment. And walking was really helpful for me to not focus so much on what I was saying and like really being able to process those emotions and get them out. But essentially through his help, I was able to get connected to a psychologist who then, because I wanted to re-explore this whole idea of like, what is ADHD and how does that fit into my life? And I went to see a psychologist. It took me forever to get in. It took me like 6 months to get an appointment. And when I finally did, I sit down on the couch and he just instantly starts laughing. He's like, as soon as I saw your intake form, I knew. He was like, we got a live one. He shows me the intake form. I spell my name Asley. I was born in 91, 89. And like just all like little mistakes, right? Like you could tell like I was not paying attention when I filled this thing out. And he's like, now that doesn't necessarily mean that you have ADHD, but it's definitely like that for me was a flag. And so we get to talking and he was just so wonderful. He changed my life and he was able to really kind of bring to light and reframe a lot of the things that I had gone through in childhood as saying, yes, those are things, you had ADHD and nobody knew. And so they were labeling you a bad kid. He's like, one of the most common things I see is this like whole oppositional defiance disorder is a lot of times in kids who have undiagnosed ADHD. And especially in that time when I was growing up in the 90s, because people's ADHD really wasn't like, I remember, and it's still kind of this way, but I remember people were like, that's not a thing. So we had 3 appointments. The first one is just chatting. The second one, he gave me essentially what was like a logic test, which was my worst nightmare come to life because I was sitting in front of him like this while he gives me math problems to solve and like logic puzzles. And he's like, oh, like find the pattern in this. And I'm sweating, right? And I tell him, I'm like, I hope you know, this is the absolute worst thing to ever happen to me. And he was like, he's like, I get it because I've had so many people in that seat before. And he's like, and I imagine that the anxiety, like you said, the anxiety to perform, the anxiety of being perceived as you perform, and also, you've got all of this crap running around in your head while you're trying to focus and solve a problem. He's like, it's amazing that you've actually made it as far as you have in your life. He's like, I've seen people with your same level of ADHD who can't have a job. They haven't finished school, So he was like, kudos to you, which I felt very validated after that.
For sure.
But yeah, so, then the third appointment was the official diagnosis, and I got this big old document of like all of his observations about me, and I was like, fascinating. So that was, and that started my healing journey of like healing from all of this childhood stuff of feeling very shameful for how I acted as a child, and understanding like if I had known then what I know now, I would have been able to get the help I needed, but I was a kid and my parents didn't know, and so I survived in the way that I knew, which was apparently kicking kids and
But I think I think about this partially because of the work that I do. The company that I work for, we support families of kids with special needs, and I'm in my late 20s, Ash is mid 30s, so like I feel like our generation, growing up, and like me being in elementary school and middle school, there was like it was so rare to have anyone diagnosed with like ADD or ADHD, and like yes, there has been, to your point, there has been more research and determination done on it. Representation in women is still very lacking, but like you see so much more of it now, where like people are kind of figuring it out now. So that I feel like maybe kids nowadays, like I see a lot more that, or another diagnosis or something else. But it's like at the time when there wasn't all that much, like you didn't know,
right?
You didn't.
Right.
But even like, I don't know, did the medical professionals even know? Like,
right.
It's kind of become I think more of a growing field over the last like 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and just the concept of neurodivergence in general, that there are people whose brains operate differently, and how we've become much more accepting of that, because I think that's been, especially for people who have autism, because when you talk about it as being on a spectrum, ADHD is the very bottom level of the autism spectrum, and autism runs in my family, or multiple people in my family are autistic, and it's just strange to see, because I'm one of 5 siblings, and I would say we all have some level of traits, like autistic traits, and but as kids, like, nobody was talking about that. Or and also because I feel like we're so mild compared to there are much more severe cases, but autism when I was growing up was like a bad word. And I think that now that I understand it better, it still can be a bad word in the way, like, people are definitely looking at it from there's like there are some very severe cases. Yes. My nephew is, I believe he's 5 now, and he's nonverbal autistic. So that's definitely
it's tough. It's hard.
Yeah, and so there's definitely adjustments that you have to make as a family, but I think that it's a lot better now than when it was like, that was like a dirty word. Like, you didn't talk about it in the 90s.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and I'm thinking about this also like in the scope of myself, do you find that you, like, obviously if you struggle with mental health, it can affect who you are and sometimes like how you show up in relationships. Do you feel like that has affected like your choice in partner? Or like, I think about like my love languages too, and how those represent, and just like, I think one of the things that my primary love language, for example, is like words of affirmation. I definitely think from growing up the way that I have a big pride complex, and like I don't like need validation to exist, but it's nice. Yeah. And so it's like, I want people to be proud of me. I want people to say that they're proud of me. I want, like, I kind of need to hear it from you, because we didn't really hear it all that much growing up, or it was, I don't know, there's a difference between, I think, a teacher saying like, you did a good job, and then just like seeing that you got a certain grade. Right. That might be like high. So I know that for me, like, words of affirmation, that's who I am. Or I tend to go for partners who are much more relaxed. Yeah. Because like when we travel, like my dad's an airport dad, we are at the airport like too early, and so like that, me and my brother, like we get all like antsy and stuff in that sort of situation. And so when I've been with partners and we traveled, it's kind of like I rely on them, because they tend to be more low key to like kind of help me regulate in that situation. It's like, we will make it on the plane, or if there's turbulence, like it's gonna be okay. But like that's what stresses me out, right? That's like kind of the safety thing. So I know for me, like, opposites attract, sure, but in my case, yes, because I tend to go for people that are more, or who appear to be more relaxed, because like I can be the high strung one of like the pair. Yeah, and I definitely noticed that I have that tendency, and I think the way that, I mean, taking Paul and I as an example, Paul is the more, I would say we're both high strung in our own ways. I typically get I have sensory overload all the time. Not all the time, but there are a lot of situations where my brain just shuts down. And I'm like, the music is too high, and my clothes are itchy, and things are happening. It's too much. So Paul's very organized. He's very logical. He's very good at getting us places on time. He's very good at redirecting my conversations to come back like you are. And and I think he's a good compliment to me, because he even says, he's like, I tend to fall on the side of like I'm a little more OCD about things. And he's like, you help relax me a little bit and help me just kind of go with the flow. And
well, I wouldn't say I'm typically like a go with the flow person,
Yeah.
but I definitely think that I help him kind of loosen up in those situations, whereas he helps me be more regimented.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think in the past, I've always been very attracted to people who have similar personalities to me, like ADHD, or I used to date someone who was autistic, and my initial attraction to them is because we have very similar personalities, and then we can get on tangents about things, and you know, the conversations are really good, it's very spontaneous, but they don't end up being good partners. They never ended up being a good partner for me because, like, I feel like we just were, I don't want to say, like, we weren't messes per se, but, you know, it was very difficult. It's very difficult when you have two people who just have this incessant word vomit going on in your brain or whatever, to be able to really, you know, settle down and focus on what we need to, what are our common goals as a couple, like what do we need to focus on and everything. But I do love, I can walk in a room and I can be like, that person has ADHD and I'm gonna talk to them about some shit for like 45 minutes, you know, but like I feel like I can sense it, you know. But I do enjoy now because I feel like now, especially going to the gym and there's just so many different personalities, I really enjoy meeting people who don't have ADHD because I'm like, wow, like it is such a different thought cycle, and you know, I feel like I learn a lot from that. But yes, I do feel like it is definitely interesting how we pair up in partnerships and relationships based on you know, what we either need or didn't get as kids.
For sure. It's family, baby.
Yeah, right.
Talk to me about
Just
that.
like and as far as my love languages go, I'm definitely, I'm a words of affirmation girly, and also a physical touch. Like there's a meme about people with, well, specifically people with autism, but there's like, you know, this idea that autistic people don't like to be touched, but then there will be this point where you're like, please crush my soul back into my body, and I'm like, that's me all the time. I'm like, I need you to hug me so that I can feel physically present in here.
But like I experience that to some degree, but I think that's also, I don't know if it's like the highs and lows of like, I mean, maybe it relates to anxiety too, because I've had moments where it's like, I just want to be held. I don't want anything like past that, you know, but then I'm like, how do I articulate that in a way that doesn't frustrate someone?
Right.
So, you know, it's always something.
That's my struggle too.
I guess like kind of moving from that, like, is there anything that you want like people to know, either about like, I don't know, ADHD or like interacting with you? I think your story is really valuable, especially when it comes, like we said, there's not a lot of research when it comes to how ADHD presents in women. So like, is there anything that you're like, you want to impart to the people?
I think that my biggest things that I have learned since going on this diagnosis journey is that I guess first we have to talk about the whole like to medicate or not medicate, because that makes a huge difference in how you want to move forward once you have. So there's the ADHD diagnosis, and then it's like, what do you want to do about it? And I thought that taking stimulants was going to change my whole life. And I was like, oh, everything's going to get so much better. And it didn't. It actually got worse before it got better. And I wouldn't even say it's better now, because there are so many side effects with taking Adderall and taking other stimulants. And there are non-stimulant options too if you do get diagnosed. But for me, they those didn't work. I've tried them all. So it's about finding exactly what works for you.
Yeah.
But there are downsides, you know, because so the biggest thing that I have with Adderall is I get a really bad, and this happens with people, they get a really bad hangover or like a crash when it wears off. So I take an extended release. I get about 8 hours. So I really have to be very mindful of when I take that, because I'm like, if I take it right when I wake up, that's great. I get like 8-ish hours, it ebbs and flows, right? But I get about at least a good 4 hours of work, right? And I'm super focused, but then I don't have it in me to go to the gym afterwards, because I'm like, once I crash, it's kind of like I feel like I go through like a mini temper tantrum, and I'm very sullen and I'm very quiet, and I'm like, I don't want people, maybe some people are gonna get this. I don't want people to touch me with their eyes.
You don't like to be perceived. You don't like to be perceived.
I'm like, oh, it feels so bad. I'm like, I don't want anyone looking at me. Yeah. So it's just like, I'm sitting here giving myself the ick because I'm feeling like, but yeah, so there's definitely, like, I'll usually take it at noon, but then that's the whole morning where I'm like, just off on my bullshit, because I don't know, like, unless I'm gonna give some tips though, because I have learned some things. But most of the time it's really hard for me to sit down and be like, it's work time and I need to sit here and sit still. Yeah. But the biggest things I would say is if you decide to medicate, know that, or if you decide to go down this road of diagnosis, right? It can be very validating, but I think that a lot of times people will put a lot of emphasis on a diagnosis. And for some people that's very, like for me, that made a huge difference. And I was able to look at my life in a much different way after that. But I think a lot of times people will get hung up on that diagnosis, and they might, say, well, I have this, so I don't know. I think it can be used for good. I think it can also be used for evil, whatever. And so it's just staying. I think there's a new, and maybe we can talk about this too when we have. I can't wait to get some therapists on. I know, we're very excited. Yeah, because I would love to hear. There's a big debate of, is it ADHD or is it trauma? Is it autism or is it trauma? Is it because so many of these things manifest so similarly? Yeah. And so it's very difficult to say, okay, do I have this thing or the other thing? And I think you have to kind of look at it as like, what's going to be most beneficial to you. It was beneficial to me to get the label, but for some people it's not beneficial to have a label, or they might look at it, perceive it negatively. So I would say, like, you have to kind of know who you are and what's important to you. Mm-hmm. And then if you do get diagnosed, you have to realize that medication isn't going to be this magical fix-all, and sometimes it's going to make your life harder. And it's definitely made my social life harder, easier and harder in some ways. And even very little things, like Paul noticed when I take my Adderall, I have delays. I have delays in speech. I have delays in, like, I really shouldn't be driving on that shit, because like the time it takes for my brain to register that it's a red light, and for my brain to be like, foot, hit the brake, it takes it's just a little bit longer than it really should be, because I don't know, and I think it's just something, part of how it like slows your brain down and allows you to focus more. It's also, and I haven't heard anyone else talk about that side effect, so maybe that's just me. I would love to know if other people have that, but yeah, there's just little things like that you have to be cognizant of. But my hot tips, and then I'll stop talking. My hot tips are, if you want to get shit done during the day, put shoes on. Like, if you work from home, like, shoes on your feet means you can't, my sister always puts it this way, she's like, if I have shoes on my feet, I can't like lay down and take a nap.
Yeah. No shoes on the bed.
No shoes on the bed. That is not okay.
Nope.
I got a walking treadmill. That helps because I cannot do mundane, shitty tasks like send emails or just, update my little tasks in my project management tool unless I'm walking and doing other things. So that helps immensely. And, the usual stuff, like if I get on my phone first thing in the morning, that sets the tone for I need more dopamine because I get those quick fixes from like TikTok or Instagram, and then my brain is craving it so much. So I can go into like a doom scroll really fast. So I don't know. I feel like everyone knows that one, but that's we know it, but do we do it? Yeah. So that's my rant. Trying to think if there's anything else.
I mean, if people have questions, we are both very open to talking about mental health. I talk about therapy a lot in the hopes that, if you're thinking about it and you think you might need it, I don't know, it's just like, again, I hate saying I want to be relatable, but again, it's like, we do it. It's like, I love talking. I get to talk to my therapist next week. I'm so excited. I love it at this point. But yeah, it's like, if it's something that you're thinking about, know that you're not alone if you struggle with anxiety. And yes, that's something that, manifests differently in everyone. But I struggle with it too. Happy to talk about it. If you have gone through the diagnosis of ADHD or you think it might be something that affects your life, Ash is a great resource.
I've had a lot of people approach me since I was diagnosed and then get diagnoses themselves.
Yes.
So actually one of my friends is now going through getting diagnosed for autism because directly, and it was directly related to me going through my diagnosis, and she was like, I see a lot of similarities in some of the things that I struggle with. So, and I think it's important to, we take such good care of our bodies.
Yeah.
We definitely should focus on mental health as well, and getting the care and advocating for ourselves as well, both mentally and physically.
Yeah.
I will say something that one other thing that I did want to talk about is how, maybe non-therapy ways that we've healed. Because I think therapy, your face.
I don't have any. No, I'm just
well, and I think, and I thought about this a lot because I was like, okay, so this morning when I came into the gym, I, did my little warm up. I had my conversation hour with you guys, and and then I did my little workout, and I had my headphones on, and I was in the moment, and I'm just looking out at the gym and all these people, and I'm like, I've made my rounds and had my little conversations with everybody, and I felt joy.
Yeah.
And I think it was that little glimmer in my whole day that I was like, when's the last time that I've stopped and really felt joy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that the reason for that joy is the feeling of community.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, so I listened to this, there was a CEO of L'Oreal, I believe, he was talking about return to office policy, and he was like, he came at it from a very different perspective than I had thought about, and it got me thinking about this whole idea of community. And he was like, he's like, we're a hybrid workplace and we always will be. He's like, I think that being in the office is valuable because of the community, because so many people don't have that, right? And I was like, that's actually, now I'm all for, I'm like, I will work from home till the day.
We love working from home.
Yeah, I love everything about it. But I do think that it is important to have some setting where you can go and be social.
Yeah.
And I think our tendency especially after the pandemic, is to isolate when we are feeling our emotions.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a good thing, but I think, like, this morning I was feeling sad. I've been feeling sad about a lot of things, and like they've just kind of built up all over throughout this week. And I was like, I could lay in bed and that sadness would probably build, or I could let my emotions be a catalyst for change. And I could let this sadness, because usually when we feel sadness, it's our body's way of telling us that we need to connect in some way, you know, with others or with ourselves. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to my third place, you know, my community spot, and I felt so happy being there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, have you felt like you've had the same experience with the gym or with like another community?
I definitely, and now that you say that, like non-therapy, I mean, I think our female friendships are definitely another form of therapy to a degree, because I think a lot of us can relate to similar experiences. Like we talk, again, like it's kind of the point of all of this, right? Is like we talk about bullshit and then we're like, oh my God, I'm just feeling fucking terrible. Like, what do I do? So yeah, I do feel it in the gym as well. I think it's all kind of lumped together, like those relationships. I know we talk about going on walks, like I need to go outside and just like walk around Wash Park and just do whatever. I mean, my cat brings me joy even when he's annoying. I don't know, I feel like, therapy is obviously a big part of it. I think I've just learned to kind of take it in stride, and I think I have definitely become like a much more secure person, not just a person, but secure partner over the last year as well. So it's like when things, I've gotten a lot better at like affirming myself. So like, yeah, I still enjoy having validation from outside sources, but it's like, I also think I'm great. And I hope that doesn't come off as vain. If it's vain, it's fine. But also like,
you're great.
I'm just like, thank you. I think you're great. But it's just like, I have enough self-confidence that I'm like, it's out of some things are out of my control and I can be stressed about it. But like in the end, I can only do what I can do. I feel like those are the big things. And then just trying to like take my mind off of stuff even for a little bit. So like I have my shows that I watch when I'm either feeling sad or feeling happy. Like it's just, I do the things that make me comfortable. I think I've gotten better at being more open with my parents too. Like there are some things that I don't tell them, or that I tried to like tamp down a little bit, because they did go through a phase of like being concerned about me like just after we moved, which is valid, right? Or I go get a tattoo and just like the sweet pain channel it, so that's what I'm doing this week. Like, oops, sorry.
One of my friends, she says, she's like, whenever I'm having a hard time, I go and get a microneedling session. And she's like, it's something about being stabbed in the face over and over with a dozen tiny needles brings me so much relief. And I'm like, I guess that's valid. Yeah, like I get it.
Granted, I have seen memes and stuff where it's like people who have tattoos, like they just have a lot of trauma. Or the artist is like, so what's your trauma? So that's another thing. But yeah, there's lots. I think I've just learned like better ways to cope. I've definitely like stabilized. There was a point a couple years ago where like it was just not. And part of it, I chalk it up to birth control too, because it does like mess with your hormones. Again, another conversation for another day. But like I've definitely stabilized. But part of that might also be like getting older, and there's a lot of factors that go into kind of figuring your shit out. Not that it's totally figured out, but we're getting there. Hopefully.
We're on our way.
We're on our way.
I think too, a bigger thing is that whole getting older and maturing in so many ways. You go through all of these life experiences, and also I can say at 34, like I'm just tired. And I'm just too tired to be anxious about a lot of things, and I don't care one iota about what other people think, or because I'm like, there's things out of my control, And sure, like I don't like to be perceived, but I'm also, it's not like stopping me from going out and living my life, because I'm just like, I'm just so tired and I don't care and I just need to go out and get my things done.
I am not there yet. So if you listen to this, I am trying to get there, but I still get concerned about my friends. So don't leave me. Please don't do that. If I cry, it just happens sometimes.
Yeah, give it 5 years. We were this summer. We were in Cleveland, and we were in town for something, and it was like tornado season in Cleveland. Or well, we were staying with Paul's parents, so out in the country, and it's like midnight, and our phones go off because there's a tornado warning, and it's like seek shelter immediately. And I like look at it, and I look at Paul, and I'm just like, no. So there's a point in your life where you will be too tired to care about tornado warnings.
Dude.
And
in Texas, we would get those.
Yeah.
And I would put my forms in a backpack. I would get my stuff ready, and I would sit in, like, we'd be playing some, game, L'Orange would be playing some game or something, and I'm, like, literally sitting on the floor with, like, my backpack, ready to go hide in the inside back. That's anxiety.
Yes.
The tornado that's potentially non-existent is also like miles away, and my ass is like, we need to go like inside. That's anxiety.
Yeah,
that's what
like,
it's like.
Why is no one else freaking out about
He's
this?
like playing a game, and I'm like, guys, please help me. So
yeah, yeah. Don't worry. There's a time in your life when you just like, you're like, I just want to sleep.
I also want to sleep.
Yeah. But I do remember being like 23, and I lived with my grandparents when I came home from Spain and was trying to figure my life out. And oh man, we like where they lived, we would get a ton of tornado warnings and everything. And every time it would go off, I'd go and I'd wake them up and I'd make them get their asses in the basement, and then we'd be like sitting there. My poor grandparents are like, I just don't care. And I'm like, how can you not care? This is important, so, and now I get it.
Yeah.
Because I'm just not getting out of bed for that. Like, the house can be whisked away, it's fine.
Well, it will be, because it's like 800 years old.
Yes. There's no chance that my house is making it.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. Well, yeah. If you have questions about mental health, we're here for you. We also want to bring our therapist friends on. So if you are a therapist, get ready for when we call you.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for hanging out again. Thanks to everyone who listened after our launch. I realized we launched our podcast during No Social Media January, so we're just going to have to work extra hard in February maybe. But we're really excited that you all are here on this journey with us. And thank you for positive feedback, 5-star reviews only.
Yes, please.
Because we want to be famous.
Yeah, and also, if you haven't noticed, we might take issue with criticism.
I'm not good with it. I'm a GT kid, I'm not good with criticism. Or if you do, then maybe just say one honest thing every day instead of a whole conversation.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's what I've learned.
That's fair. I do want to challenge people to give feedback in a way that is helpful.
Yes.
And not hurtful.
Yeah.
I guess.
So, anonymous submissions only. All right. Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.